Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Bikes or Death podcast. My name is Patrick, and I am your host. I am stoked to be recording in the very new. Actually, it's not even new. It hasn't even been built yet. But I'm currently sitting in what is going to be the Bikes or Death studio. If you've been following along on social media or whatnot, you'll know that over the last couple weeks, I've been moving just across town. Nothing crazy, but one of the reasons that I went with this house is because it has this really sick shop that the previous owner built himself. It's original to the 1970s. It's super cool. The floor is brick, the wall is brick. So I got big plans to make this studio pretty cool. Right now, it's just a makeshift podcast, but I was too excited to just record inside the house. So I came out here, set up the table, a chair, a couple little things, and bada boom, bada bing, we're podcasting. On that note, I am running my little air conditioner. I'm curious if this mic is going to pick it up or not. So if it does, I apologize, and I'll get it fixed in the future. Okay, here we go. Well, I first want to thank all the patrons that have signed up. Y'all showed up big time. Since the last time I released an episode, we've had quite a few new subscribers to Patreon. So I want to give a shout out to Robert T, Gabriel P, Hannah J, Chad G, Mel, Kevin W, Ryan M, and Scott. Thank y'all so much for signing up. That really makes me feel good, to be honest. And it gets us closer to the goal of $500 per month. If you haven't visited my Patreon page, you may not be aware of this, but when I hit $500 a month, I am going to start creating a Patreon-only podcast called Shifting Gears. Go over to patreon.com/bikesardeath and hop on the patron train. All right, well, this week's episode is brought to you by Rockgeist. My friends over at Rockgeist are giving away another custom frame bag this month, October. Tickets are only $5, and the proceeds this month go directly to the WTF Bike Explorers. To enter, all you have to do is head over to rockgeist.com. That's ROCGEIST. It's German, so the E comes first. Or you can just check out the show notes, and I'll have a link down there. They are going to be doing this every single month. So if you don't win in October, no problem. You circle back around next month, throw your $5 in the pot. You hope for the new frame bag, but you already know you're a winner because you're donating to a great cause. Now, while you're there, make sure you send them a message and let them know other suggestions of organizations or groups, whether they're big or small, that are working to lower the barriers for people to start bikepacking, especially for those underrepresented groups and marginalized people. This week's show is also brought to you by Gooder. Gooder is a sunglass brand, if you didn't know, and I freaking love them. And last week I told you a story, so I think I'll do that again. Like I said, I'm moving, so shit's everywhere, and I misplaced my favorite pair of Gooder sunglasses. If you want to know, they're the ones called Buzzed on the Tower. I'm sure I didn't lose them. I'm thinking that they're somewhere, and I haven't been able to find them. But my initial reaction was to get upset because I just lost a pair of sunglasses. And then I remembered, oh, wait, I didn't pay a metric shit ton of money for these. They were only $35. So worst case scenario, I lost them. No big deal. I'll go get another pair. But the other great thing about them being affordable is that I don't own just one pair. I actually have 6 of them. So I got plenty of options to choose from. If you want to see what sunglasses I'm rocking, Gooder set up a landing page. So just go to gooder.com. That's GOODR. You don't need an E.com/bikesardeath. You can check out all the models that I'm rocking. And I'm probably going to be adding to that, honestly, because I don't think 6 is enough. I feel like 10 or 12 is probably a better number. So anyway, go over, check out what I'm wearing, and check out all the other ones. Even if you only go there to read the names, they have a bunch of like crazy names, which is like half the fun. So go check them out. If you hate them, then they weren't that expensive and it's no big deal, but they're actually really good sunglasses. I freaking love them. They're polarized, they're lightweight, they're all the blah, blah, blah things. So blah, blah, blah sunglasses. All right. Well, this week's show is with a very special guest, Talib. You may know of him because he was the person who led and organized a Black History ride in Austin, Texas. I wasn't able to make the initial ride due to a conflict, but we circled back around about a month or so after that. and he and I did the route together. There were some people that joined us that rode along with us, and we went and previewed some of the route. And it was really neat because this is the first time that I've ever taken the podcast and went really mobile with it. So we met at a spot, we recorded for 15 minutes, whatnot. Then we rode to the next spot, we recorded there. You get the idea. We kept riding and then talking. And so it's a little bit different. And I'm excited for this episode, both because of the content and what he's doing, and to throw some light and some exposure on that route, and hopefully other people will go out there and enjoy it. But also just because I'm trying something new with the podcast, and definitely think that I want to try to incorporate more of this kind of style into it and kind of mix it up a little bit. Let's have some fun, you know? Oh, you know what? Earlier, I forgot to tell you all about how you can support the Bikes or Death podcast. Silly me. Well, let me tell you, I made it easy on you. All you got to do is head over to bikesfordeath.com. There's lots of ways. Like I said, you can join on Patreon. You could send a one-time donation through PayPal. And by the way, you don't need a PayPal account to do that. You can use a credit card, debit card, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Or you can check out the store, which has historically only been like shirts and T-shirts, stickers, or shirts and stickers and patches and all that kind of stuff. But I recently just partnered with a company who reached out to me, and I'm now able to offer some very, very select products. Like when I say select, I mean there's only 2 on there right now. So if you head over there, you can check those out. They're the K-Lite pack, the road or the mountain bike version, or whether you got an SP hub or a Solon hub. Oh, there goes an airplane. Oh yeah, bring it. Bring on that audio. And I'm also stocking Walmart bars, which have been all the buzz. I mean, all the wide bars have been like, everybody wants to know about them. So I'm like anybody else. I got curious, and handlebars aren't that expensive. They're actually one of my favorite tweaks to make to a bike. I think handlebars and tires, they're the cheapest and easiest things you can do to like completely change your bike. Maybe not completely, but really give your bike like a totally different look and feel. So it's not uncommon that I'll swap out my bars. And I went with the 55s. I put them on my Salsa Fargo, and I freaking love them. And actually, I'm looking at getting some carbon ones now for the Chumba. But anyway, if you want to check those out, head over to bikesfordeath.com. I'm carrying all kinds of good stuff. Oh, and we got the new Sweat Tech 2.0 shirts. If you don't know what they are, they're freaking awesome. And I'm not just saying that because I'm selling it. I'm also telling you because they're awesome. On the front, it's just the Bikes or Death logo, but on the back, there's nothing until you sweat. And then when your sweat reveals a secret message. Right now, it just says ride your damn bike, but in the future, we're going to have some fun with that, and you might get some surprise messages or something. So anyway, it's a good, fun shirt. So there's lots of new things going on. Like I've said, I am ramping up on Bikes or Death. Lots of new things are going to be coming, and this is just a little sneak peek. So appreciate all of you. Appreciate the support. If it wasn't for y'all, well, I wouldn't be here, or I would be here, and I would be talking to a lot less people. All right. Well, I really, really did enjoy this interview with Talib. Super cool dude. Really respect him for being a leader, and appreciate him taking the time. I hope you dig this episode too. So without further ado, let's have Miles Arbor take it away with the Bikes or Death theme song.
You load up your bike, you ride away from home. You could be with your friends or you could be alone. You ride for a day or maybe more. You just love being in the great outdoors. Everything you need is strapped to your bars, including that new pillow you got from Santa Claus. And then you think, oh shit, to yourself. You left that super lightweight tent on the living room shelf. Bikes or death. Bikes or death. Podcast.
I mean, first off, man, we're sitting here in Austin, Texas, outside of the Quickie Pickie. Did you pick this for any other reason other than it had a cool name, or what?
Well, so this actually is in like a historic part of Austin, of East Austin. So, you know, we're in East Austin. This is pretty much the center of what is known as like the Six Square Cultural District. And essentially, this was an area of Austin that in 1928, there was a master plan to basically push all like African Americans over. So we kind of actually meet up here because it's convenient. There are bathrooms. There's like it's a little bodega here, so it's really just convenient.
Yeah, it's a cool spot.
Good place to grab a pint too sometimes.
Right on. You need it before and after and during the ride sometimes.
Yeah, maybe.
Depends on your flavor. Well, before we get too into the weeds, you came on my radar because you organized a Black History ride through Austin. A lot of people showed up, got a lot of publicity, and a lot of people are going to know you from that. But real quick, like, what is your name and what do you do outside of organizing these types of group rides and stuff?
Yeah, so my name is Talib Abdullahi. I've lived in Austin for about 12 years. I moved here, to go to UT, basically. Yeah, I essentially I'm a professional event planner. I work for Tito's Vodka.
You're a professional what?
Event planner.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I do plan events and stuff, and I don't know, I'm generally a creative person. Both my parents are artists.
Yeah.
So I'm known at work and in other circles as just someone that comes up with interesting ideas, stuff like that. So the Black History Social Ride idea was really just something that I thought was going to be a small handful of friends, kind of like this.
Yeah.
You know, like maybe a dozen, maybe 20. I have friends that are designers. Someone designed a poster that just would not stop getting shared. All the local bike shops picked it up. So
yeah. Well, for anybody who doesn't know, I mean, let's like back up and say, like, first of all, what inspired you to create the route, and then we can get into what the route is, and then we're actually going to go ride some of it. So we got some of our friends together today, and we're going to go check out some of the spots.
Yeah, right on. You know, after seeing some of the protests here in Austin, we've had like a lot of very, just very active protests, right in front of Austin Police Department, and, kind of experiencing what that was like a couple times. I realized like there was a lot of anger and energy that was on the streets.
Yeah.
And I really recognized that, one, there's a lot to be angry about, but two, if people are, that upset, like, why don't we try to channel some of that energy into a fashion where, people are kind of learning a little bit,
right,
and taking a little bit more out of the time, instead of like yelling at the police all day.
Right.
Why don't they start channeling that energy kind of in a way that is going to enlighten them a little bit?
Right.
And then, I'm an American Studies major, which is what I graduated with at UT. And that's kind of like a minorities history of America. And we talk about a lot of these, former freedmen's communities and kind of locations in Austin that a lot of people don't really know about. A lot of people haven't really experienced or,
they're just not aware of.
They're just not aware
you go through your day-to-day life and you didn't know that was a historic significant site or whatnot. I mean,
yeah,
a lot of people go through their life like that. So
right. And as a very bikeable city with a very, very thriving bike community of many pro racers, bike packers, just commuters, just all different stripes, I was like, why don't we just start doing bike rides?
Right.
And stopping at these places that people are riding their bikes right past without any idea that they have this historical significance, because it seems like people are ready to learn that or wanting to learn more about those types of topics.
Yeah, take advantage of everybody's energy and give them something positive to do, like something to learn about, instead of just yelling, which, yelling you need to do. My voice needs to be heard, but now what do we do, right? Like, how can we educate ourselves? One thing I like about what you're doing, I just read a book, oh my gosh, it was about Native Americans. I completely forgot the name of the book off the top of my head. But I learned a lot about the history of the Native Americans and what they went through. And a lot of it happened really very close to where a lot of it happened here in my hometown of Brazos County. And I immediately went and started, I'm still working on it, but creating a big, like 300-mile bike packing loop that will showcase some of the historically significant features, like Fort Parker with Cynthia Parker, where she was like kidnapped and taken away. Like, wow, that's still there. Like, you can go visit that, and you can actually rent that facility, and we could like have a group camp there, and and like,
no joke, that's rad.
Yeah, so
cool.
a similar type of thing. But I'm all about that. Is like, it's good that people are like energized. It's good that there's people that are aware of the need for social change, but we really need things to do and ways to educate ourselves. Like, what do we do with that?
Exactly. Like, you need an activity that sort of kind of ties it all together.
Yeah.
That's a really cool project you're working on, by the way.
Oh,
that's
thank you.
Super cool.
Yeah, it's the same thing as what you're doing. It's just, I even want to do more bikepacking events. Whenever you go into an area, you learn about the culture, the history, the people that came there before, the food, whatever it is, like, you shouldn't just like go through a place. You should like appreciate it to some extent,
Yeah, you should, I don't know, really take something away, I think. I think that makes our bike rides even more meaningful when you like gain some knowledge and you feel like it's relevant to your life or relevant to what's going on now.
What do you think you want people to take away from this ride that we're going to go on tonight?
I think I want people to just sort of take away that there's a lot around us that has happened before us. And if we take a little time out of our day to sort of read about it, listen to the history, we can avoid repeating some of the same mistakes that have already happened.
Yeah.
Because as we get into this history, you start to realize like, oh, well, these things that we're talking about today with social justice, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, it's the same. We're on a different chapter of the same story.
Right.
And we haven't gotten to the next really significant piece of change.
Yeah.
It's just kind of mirroring itself. So that's why it's important that I think we take some time to talk about the history.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe we realize that there are some really cool figures that we haven't heard about that live in the city.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of... we don't get any value by whitewashing anything and pretending like certain things that no one gets value out of that. I mean, one thing that I'm passionate about is conversation, which I appreciate you having one with me, and educating people. Like, not just one reason I started a podcast, you don't know me, is like I got off of Facebook because of all the it's just like memes and people throwing shit at each other, and it's just nasty, and you never get anywhere. And what I really want to do is like start to talk to people and figure out what's really going on and educate people and be a platform so that you can share and other people can share and we can all learn and benefit from that. But if we can't sit down and have conversations, then we're all fucked as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, that's very true. Yeah, it starts with a conversation.
So you planned this event. You didn't anticipate many people would come, but let's tie a bow on that. What was the result of that campaign and everything?
Sure. Yeah. And it was from the putting the idea out solely on my Instagram story to having the event happen within the span basically of exactly 7 days, or you might even say it was just like 6 days.
So it was like 6 or 7 days, and you went from like thinking only a few people come.
Idea to 400 people. Yeah.
Wow.
And so in the evening I was like, oh, cool. And by the end of that first day, people were like, oh yeah, I screenshot it. I shared it on my Facebook with my work colleagues, and then they shared it, and I was like, whoa.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Did you get nervous?
A little bit. But then again, I kind of like sort of accepted that perhaps I'm kind of the conduit. Like, I'm not a historian, but I can tell some of these stories.
Right.
And if people want to hear it, like, I don't really need to be nervous, because it's just like, some of my like best friends of all time are here.
Yeah, people are here because they want to support and
yeah. And I realized it wasn't really there wasn't a huge difference between me imagining like just repeating this history to like a handful of my friends, or if it happens to be 300 or 400 people, because it's important and everyone wants to be there. And so, I was definitely nervous at the beginning, but then I just kind of like shook it off and I was like, whatever, man. Like after the first bike ride, I was like, or after we rode somewhere, I was like, all right.
Was the vibe good? Was
great.
It all went like super smooth. No crazy people coming out of the woodworks trying to cause drama or...
Crazy people are around, man. I think Sandy's a little overrated. But
good point.
We didn't know. No bad actors. Everyone was cool. I started off by saying very bluntly, I was like, my boss is here, and my boss's boss, and my boss's boss's boss, who brought his family. So I was like, please, everybody.
Yeah.
This was also right in June, and there was a lot of protesting and kind of wild stuff happening downtown. But everyone was super civil and awesome.
Cool. Well, what's going to be our first stop? Where are we headed to right now?
We're going to start at the Texas African American Memorial, right in front of the Capitol. That kind of paints a nice picture of basically the entire story from the first African American, first black person to basically enter Texas in the 1500s, up through some really recent, history. So it paints a really awesome picture, and that's like where we start the ride usually.
Cool. Let's go do it. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Thanks. All right, so made it to the first stop.
Yeah,
only one climb between us, and
yeah, I'm feeling pretty sweaty. It is August in Texas.
Yeah, very sweaty. So where are we right now?
We're right in front of the Texas State Capitol, right here at the seat of decision making and government for the entire state of Texas. Standing right in front of the Texas African American History Memorial. This memorial actually went up fairly recently in 2016. There was a lot of opposition actually to it going in. Interestingly enough, there is actually a large Confederate monument that kind of mirrors where this one is sitting on the other side of the Capitol grounds. Yeah. So there was a lot of opposition for many years about putting this in. So it was George Bush Jr. that actually signed it, and it took them, a handful of years, 8 years to get it put here. But it's really interesting. It highlights emancipation for African Americans in Texas, which actually happened in Galveston, as you guys know. How many of you guys know about Juneteenth? Right. So basically when, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, basically said, yo, black people are free. In Texas, basically the local thought was like, no, we don't want to have to do that. You're going to have to come down here and free them yourselves. So the Emancipation Proclamation was actually read at, the island of Galveston, which is like an hour away from Houston. And we have this beautiful statue to kind of commemorate it.
Nice. Do you know what the opposition was to the statue going in?
So I don't. I was here at the unveiling of the statue, and there were several neo-Nazis with their guns, that were here. It was not many. It was maybe like 20.
Yeah.
There was a crowd of several thousands to commemorate the statue, and then a counter-protest of people saying that you should not put a statue like this up.
Yeah. Well, it's actually a beautiful memorial, and I'm glad it's here.
Yeah. And what Ed Dwight is the sculptor. What he did was basically tried to tell the history of black folks in Texas from the very beginning to the very more recent. So on the very left, you might see that the larger figure all the way on the left. That man's name is Mustafa Azamori. He was known as Esteban or Estevanico, Little Stephen. He was a slave that was captured, I believe, by the Spanish, and he was brought basically. You know this?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, you get brownie points,
right?
You
get a gold star, Cynthia.
Yeah, when I did this first time, there were many people who are like, I have no idea what any of this is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm in that group, so props.
So basically, Estevanico came here with Cabeza de Vaca. They landed on the shore of Texas in like 1529 and basically wandered around. Estevanico was known for his ability to learn native languages, and so he was able to communicate with several different Native American tribes as they traveled throughout. So they were able to wander all the way up to the Pacific. His story is actually great. What's the name of that book?
Shipwreck.
Yeah, that. So I would just highly recommend. Like, he's a really cool.
Wait, let's say it.
What is it? Naufratios.
Naufratios. It means shipwrecked.
Yeah. There we go. Shipwrecked.
Yeah. And so basically the.
So when you led the ride, you had like a speech kind of that you gave. So you want to do that?
Oh, I can do that. Yeah. Mustafa Azamori, better known by his slave name Estevanico, was a North African explorer from Azamor, Morocco, servant in Spain who became the first African explorer of North America and Texas. He has been referred to as the greatest African man in America. In 1527, he was taken on the Spanish Narvaez expedition to establish a colony in La Florida, which at the time was composed of present-day Florida and all unexplored lands to the north and west, including northern Mexico. Estevanico was assuredly the first African to traverse Texas, and in the company of 3 Spaniards, re-entered Texas from Mexico at La Junta de los Rios. It is unknown how he actually passed away, but it's said that he was carrying basically either a peace pipe or some sort of stick, and somewhere in New Mexico encountered a tribe that noticed that belonged to a different tribe and thought that he was like an intruder or a spy, basically, and was murdered by the tribe. However, the story that I believe, which is out there, is that he basically was trusted so much by the Spanish captors that he took his own brigade and just escaped and lived with the Native Americans.
Oh,
so
never to be heard from again.
Never to be heard from again, basically. So it's not really known. He probably was killed by the Native Americans, but it's pretty metal. So on the very right of the monument, you'll see Bernard Anthony Harris Jr. Bernard is a former NASA astronaut. On February 9th, 1995, Harris became the first African American to perform a spacewalk during the second of his 2 space shuttle flights. He's the 6th African American to travel to space and first to perform a spacewalk. So he's from Temple, Texas, which is, again, 45 minutes to an hour from here. So the beautiful thing about this monument is that you have the first African American man basically in Texas and in the entire United States. And then you also have an African American man from Texas who goes into space and does the first spacewalk.
Yeah. Man on the moon. That's a big deal.
Yeah, it really is.
Beautiful. Do you have anything else to share about this monument?
That's about it for this one. Yeah.
Awesome. They're holding it up back there. All right, cool. So here at stop number 2, nice little hill you had us go through to get here.
It had a nice little hill. It wasn't that bad, right?
Oh, it's nice and short and
Right.
steep, just the way I like them.
just the way I like it. But yeah, so we're here in historic Clarksville, and this is a location a lot of people mostly assume as being a part of West Austin, or they call it Old West Austin. This was originally one of the first freedmen's communities in Austin, and this house, the Haskell House, is actually a very well-preserved example of what African American people lived in. This house, I believe, was built in the 1880s. It's like a Cambridge-style version of architecture that was pretty common. It's probably around 400 or 500 square feet, and typically would house like a full family.
Is this a duplex? There's 2 doors.
Yeah, so great question. Typically, what a lot of families did at the time, as a way to make money, they would create a second door and they would rent out the other half of the house to travelers. So they would put up kind of a partition or a sheet or something to kind of block it off. And so the family that lived there full time would be on one side, and then they would rent out the other side for a day, a week, or whoever to like people traveling through.
They were the original Airbnbs here in Austin.
That was like the original Airbnb.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is known as Clarksville, Texas. It's now known just as part of Austin. Clarksville is just northeast of the intersection of the Missouri Pacific Railroad and West 10th Street in West Austin. The land containing streams and steep hills has previously been a part of a plantation owned by Governor Elisha M. Peace. We'll go by his house too after this.
Okay, cool.
So we'll see this house and we'll go see the governor's house. It is said that Peace gave the land to his emancipated slaves with the vain hope that they would remain near his mansion and be able for further service. His mansion is right over there. Clarksville was founded in 1871 by Charles Clark, a freedman who changed his name from Charles Griffin after emancipation. Clark bought 2 acres of land from Confederate General Nathan G. Shelley and bought a house on what is now West 10th Street. He subdivided his land among other freedmen to start a community outside of Austin. At the time he did this was like not considered central Austin. This was like the boonies. Like Austin was down by the Capitol, and no one really crossed Shoal Creek, which is basically where Lamar ends and we go up that giant hill. So at the time, it was probably just trees and desolate, just rocks and stuff. You had mentioned that you actually didn't know the term freedman.
I was going to ask you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so you can kind of sort of draw the conclusion, but freedmen's communities basically were the first communities that, freed slaves formed together. Clarksville was a pretty successful and thriving one. So yeah, basically anytime you hear freedmen's community, that means that's where the community of former slaves banded together, built their own houses, and started their own communities. Those typically centered around churches. Right after Clarksville was founded, they didn't actually have enough money to build a church or build a community center, so they would hold them in several different homes, and this was actually one of the homes that served as a place for them to gather and to pray.
It's crazy that this home is still here. Is this the original home, do you know?
It is. Yeah, it is the original home.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. I mean, for people who are just listening, we're literally like, I don't know, we're in the heart of Austin, but I mean, there's modern houses all around us, and there's this like preserved one lot with this. I mean, I think it's a cute house, but if you had a full family living in there, it'd probably be kind of cramped. But
yeah, I mean, now it'd be kind of considered like a Vogue loft because it's pretty small.
Someone still pay $500,000 for it, though, easy.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I mean, these houses next to it, which are not the original houses, are some of the most expensive real estate in Austin now. All around us, even these houses that look like they were built in like the 40s, which are not, original Clarksville, but, have been here now for a long time, are now probably worth an exorbitant amount of money. So I think it's called the Clarksville Conservation Corporation, which is basically like the Community Preservation Board.
Yeah.
Basically worked with the city on saving this building, preventing it from being turned into like a newer home or, having it raised by developers. And they raised money to basically redo it because apparently it was not in this good of condition. And so the city came in and designated it like a public park. There's a really nice plaque, which kind of gives you a lot more detail about.
Yeah, it looks like there's even a community garden or some kind of garden around back.
Yeah, there is a community garden out back.
Cool. Very nice spot. Yeah, it's so nice that they like preserve this like right in the middle of the city. You might just drive by and be like, what's that?
When I brought people on the first ride, a lot of people were like, I've ridden by this. I've never noticed it.
Yeah,
or I ride on the street over as a bike thoroughfare.
Gotcha.
Never seen this. So
right on.
Yeah, and the woman that runs the preservation board was actually like, when we brought all the cyclists here, she was like, I've never seen this many people want to come learn about this place at the same time. This is awesome.
Oh, yeah. So is there a person that will sometimes be here, like doing guided tours and stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
cool.
Her name's Mary. She's super chill. I just emailed her. And
most tour guides are.
Yeah, luckily she showed up and yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure they were like super stoked that you were bringing some awareness to it.
Yeah. The historians I found that are, when I tell them I'm doing this, they're like, "How many people?" And I'm like, "This many
We
people."
haven't had that many people all year.
Yeah, so it's cool that if you say, "Hey, let's learn about history," and people are like, but you say, "Hey, let's go ride bikes," people are like, "Yeah," and so you kind of can, you makes your bike ride a little different.
You got some music in between. You got some beers and learn something too.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's my hope is that we can use our bikes to, learn something as well as just have fun.
Yeah, man, use it as a positive tool. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go to the next one.
Yeah, we don't have to stop and record. We'll stop at, I'll point out a couple. There are a couple buildings here that are basically like this, but they've added onto the back. So they preserved the front, and you can tell they've added their $1 million expansion in the back. And then we'll ride by the Sweet Home Baptist Church, which is like the church that has been here the longest. That's still the community center. It's still a predominantly black church, even though most of the people don't live in this neighborhood. This neighborhood used to be entirely, I think there were 400 African-American families living here, and now there are only 6.
6?
6. There were 400.
Wow.
So I probably should mention this because this is the one bit about Austin Black history that everyone should talk about. It's why we come over here.
Yeah.
I mentioned it earlier, but there was a master plan of 1928. At the time, Austin was actually considered a relatively inclusive place. It was far enough west that it was kind of away from some of the cruelty of the South. And so a lot of people kind of were like, whatever, So there's a freed slave community up here. There was one called Wheatville that we're going to go to. That's also kind of in West Austin. There were some down south. There were several actually already on the east side, but they were pretty spread out, right? The master plan in 1928 essentially said, hey, this whole mixing of, black people and white people, that's not cool. Basically, any of the black people that want to get social services like running water, paved roads, sidewalks, schools for their kids, all of that good stuff that, everyone deserves to have, basic rights, you have to live on the other side of I-35. Or at the time was called East Avenue. But you have to live basically on the other side of town where we started our ride. If you lived over here, and a lot of the people in this community persevere and they're like, no, we're not moving, they pulled their money together to start their own schools and basically to keep it because they couldn't force them to leave. But a lot of people were like, I'm not sending my kid across school to go to high school. I do want running water in my house, which is pretty reasonable. So because of that master plan in 1928, it basically consolidated all the African-American people over to the east side, and that happened citywide. And it's just a continual, continuation of the fact that it's all right, well, we respect you enough to consider you as people, but not really. We're not going to offer you the same rights and everything else unless you do what we say and get your ass over there.
Kind of unrelated, but you're very well spoken. You're very knowledgeable. How much of this did you know prior to organizing this ride, and how much of it have you kind of learned as you went?
I knew bits and pieces before I rode. I'm an American Studies major at UT, so we talked about a lot of racial issues around Texas, and we talked a lot about specific Austin examples. So I felt like I knew bits and pieces, and like I said, enough to tell my friends, explain to my friends, and then once I realized that more than a dozen people were coming, I was like, shit.
I better study.
I gotta start studying and start talking to people.
Yeah.
So the nice thing is that the more you just talk about it, the more it becomes ingrained in your memory. And I'm like, okay, I actually do kind of know some of this stuff.
For someone like me, it's more impactful to have a conversation like this rather than be in a lecture hall sometimes and just hear names and dates and histories.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So I like this. This is fun. More places? A little bit later in the ride, a little bit sweatier.
A little sweatier. It's another hill popped up on us.
But again, 3 out of 3, we are in the shade for the interview, so well done.
Yeah, I planned it that way.
You're the best event coordinator ever.
Thank you. So right now we're standing in historic Wheatville. Most people know it as West Campus. I call it the Wampus. Aaron and I have a lot of crazy stories from when we went to college here. So as you can see, this is primarily student
housing. And we're not going to hear
housing.
any. Just skip right over that part.
We're going to skip right. Actually, I think we might... I think the statute of limitation might still be.
Okay.
There was a lot of four Loco involved. I will say that.
Four Loco, yes.
Yeah, that was the Four Loco hit right when we were in college.
That's all you had to say.
Yeah. But yeah, so we're standing in Wheatville. Wheatville was the first black community associated with Austin after the Civil War. Apparently, it's a little bit older than the community we were just in up at Clarksville. James Wheat, a former slave from Arkansas, brought his family to the area and founded the community in 1867. In 1869, he bought a plot of land at what is now 2409 San Gabriel Street and became Wheatville's first landowner. 2409, this is 2402.
Okay.
So 2409 would be just up the way up here.
And describe like what we're looking at here, just to like set the scene. for
Sure,
people
yeah,
listening.
yeah. So we're standing in front of the Jacob Fontaine or Gold Dollar building. This is actually my favorite building on the tour. It was built in the 1880s, right? And it is basically, the architecture you'd say now is pretty typical of like, old West Texas. It kind of looks like an old general store. It's got some wood that's faded, as well as a lot of limestone brick.
Yeah, it could have been a bank or a saloon or
It seems like it could have been all,
anything,
at
yeah.
different points it kind of was all of
a
those
general
things.
store. Yeah.
It was actually a general store for a long time. To really set the scene, though, fortunately, they preserved this historic building, but there are brand new condos literally surrounding it that tower above it by like 6 stories.
Yeah, at least.
And this is pretty typical for this part of town. We're literally like 5 blocks west of the University of Texas campus. So this is all student housing. Lots of debauchery happens over here. But yeah, most of the people that live over here are students, and I would say hardly any of them really know about the history of this building.
Yeah, do you think they would have graffitied it if they knew?
Probably not. No, probably not.
Yeah.
Literally, I will say this part of town is one of the most dangerous parts of town, primarily because it's just all students doing stupid student stuff.
Really?
I was one of those people. Aaron was one of those people. We all had our times.
Good thing I didn't go to college. It sounds like I missed a dangerous time.
Yeah, it's really rough out here.
A big mistake. Yeah.
So yeah, a few blacksmiths lived in Wheatville, and some residents farmed and raised livestock here. George Franklin, a former slave and carpenter, purchased the land at the site of present-day 2402 San Gabriel, which is where we were standing, in 1869, and constructed a stone building with walls 4 stones thick. It is now known as the Gold Dollar or Jacob Fontaine building. It became the center of community as subsequent owners used it to house families, grocery stores, and various other businesses, and a church. Jacob Fontaine was probably the most prominent person to have lived here, and he actually was the first minister at the church we just saw.
Oh, cool.
Back down there in Clarksville.
Wow.
So, let's see.
Back when it was a small town or a
Right.
small community.
Back when it was a small community. And Jacob Fontaine's a really interesting leader. He actually started several different churches all around Austin. I think he started 5 or 6 churches around Austin. Sweet Home being one of the first. He was also really important for a lot of reasons. So he started printing one of the first newspapers this side of the Mississippi, specifically for freed slaves. And that was called the Austin Gold Dollar. The Gold Dollar was one of the first black newspapers west of the Mississippi, and one of 48 commercial black newspapers published in Texas between 1870 and 1900. It was founded in August 1876 in the Wheatville area of Austin by Jacob Fontaine. Copies are extremely scarce and records on circulation are scanty, but the Gold Dollar certainly existed in 1878, maybe as late as 1880. The newspaper emphasized the needs of freed slaves, family ties, education, frugality, moral and religious instruction, and the discipline of youth and racial justice. It struggled with black illiteracy and poverty and supported the political and social causes of its founder, a leader in politics in Travis County.
So the Gold Dollar, they're not even sure how long that was in print.
They don't have record. They don't have very many copies.
That's interesting, right? So a newspaper that we don't even have a very good record of the newspaper being on file for
Right.
historic records.
Right. Well, if you think about it, a lot of the people that ended up with the newspaper at the time were black individuals
Yeah.
in this community and around Austin. The university here probably wasn't like, yeah, send us copies of that. They were like,
Yeah.
at the time, they're like, whatever. So there are some on file. The Austin History Center does have some. So I think it's believed that they started the paper in 1870 and it lasted for a little over 20 years, like into the
Yeah.
1890s.
Yeah.
But the records for it, not really there.
Yeah,
You know?
it's interesting.
And that's kind of like a big part of this exercise and doing the bike ride is to start talking about these bits of history that we know a little bit of, but we're like, where's the rest of the
Yeah.
story? Like, I'm sure that story's out there,
Yeah, well, I'm wondering if people are going to come out of the woodworks and like fill in some of the gaps. I mean,
Yeah.
if there's a demand for the information and curiosity, maybe someone will write a book or dig further into it.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I found out actually just a week or two ago that Jacob Fontaine's great grandson did write a book on him.
Okay, cool.
So now I'm trying to find a copy of it so I can read it.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, we could put that like in a link too.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, is it not in print, I guess, right? So you said you're trying to find a copy of it, like it's not.
I think I can probably find it at a local library somewhere.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Interesting. Yeah. Very good.
Yeah. A little bit about the actual name, the Gold Dollar. Fontaine named his paper for a gold dollar given by his sister, Nellie Miller, in 1872 when they were reunited in Mississippi after a separation caused by slavery 20 years before. Fontaine earned $60, which is roughly $1,200 in today's money, to start the newspaper in his home, which is a structure that was set afire by arsonists in August 1879. Arson, right? Remember? But designated an Austin landmark in August 1977. So for any of you with siblings, imagine what it's like to not see your sibling for 20 years. That's one of the things that he endured. And like I said, like we're standing on this street where a bunch of drunk college kids normally stand. But at one point, a really great dude lived right across the street, and he was probably standing here talking local politics or, just helping out his community. So
Maybe worrying about his daughter, where she is.
yeah, exactly.
Now, that's amazing. It's so nice that you were able to bring some light to something that like gets overlooked quite easily if you just like rode your bike or drove down the street. I might not notice it.
Yeah, and that's a pretty similar story with most of the landmarks on this tour. Is like you might just ride your bike right by and not realize that, like, wow, that's actually really significant to Black history or just to history in general.
Cool.
And it doesn't hurt to stop and read the plaque or check it out.
Yeah, good on you. What else we got?
We can head up to UT. I feel like we're running a little short on time.
Well, I mean, let's do one more. You got one more for us?
Yeah, we can head up over to UT.
Cool. All right, so, at least the sun has gone down. We're getting the last little bits of sunlight there.
Yeah.
Which is nice, so it's not quite as hot.
The sunset's actually pretty nice tonight, too.
That's been great.
It's like not
Traffic's
bad at all.
been good.
Yeah. Sunday night, people are not really riding out too much.
So we're at a house.
Yeah, so this is a house. It's a house.
It's a house. It looks
house.
like a house.
So this is actually Richard Overton's house. You might have noticed the street is actually named after Richard Overton. He's somewhat of I guess you could say a national celebrity, but a local celebrity. He's just a very old, jolly, super nice dude that was usually just sitting right there on the porch on one of those yellow chairs. But yeah, he was a proud World War II veteran. His full name is Richard Arvin Overton. He was an American super centenarian who at the age of 112 years, 230 days, was the oldest verified surviving U.S. World War II veteran and oldest man in the United States. He served in the United States Army, and in 2013, he was honored by President Barack Obama. He lived in Austin, Texas from 1945 until his death in 2018.
Wow. In this house?
In this house. So he built this house right after the war.
Oh, my gosh.
So he lived here. This was the heart of really the Tillotson College area, or Houston Tillotson College, which is another stop on the tour right around the corner.
Do you know, is it still in his family? The home?
It is, yeah. So it is still in his family. His family actually is a relatively prominent family in town. His cousin, Volma Overton, who I've met his grandson, was actually the president of the NAACP, or a pretty high-ranking figure of the local NAACP that worked to desegregate a lot of Austin. His family is actually pretty influential in Austin in terms of the fight for civil rights.
Yeah, cool. I wonder what they're going to do with the house.
Essentially, when he passed away, he said, I want you to preserve every single thing in the house and turn it into a museum. His green Ford truck, looks like a mid-70s-ish, is parked in there. There's a car back there. Basically, his dying wish was not for anything to be touched in the house and for them to turn it into a museum. So
I love that. So is World War II veteran, the proud World War II veteran sign, the American flag?
Yeah. I mean,
his
it looks
vehicles are still parked there.
It looks like the lights are still on. Like he asked them not to change anything. So he was known basically for smoking several cigars a day and sipping whiskey on his porch.
Oh, man. I aspire to be such.
Yeah. And as it goes, like his last cup of whiskey and his half smoking cigar are still sitting on the table in there.
Oh, nice.
So everything is
112 years old.
He was 112 years old.
Wow, that's impactful to think about the things that he saw,
It really is. And I think it brings together some of the points we touch on in the bike ride of how the struggle for equality happened over a long time. And he was alive for all of that. And he just died like 2 years ago. So He was alive and witnessed a lot of it. And invariably, honestly, probably was victim to a lot of injustice. I was listening to, have you heard of the podcast 1619?
No.
1619 is produced by the New York Times, but it's basically a podcast like telling of, the beginning of slavery, 1619, like the very first slaves that were brought here.
Okay.
Through all of these things that happened. One of the stories they tell is about a World War II veteran. He fights for his country in World War II. He's Black. He comes back and he's like, well, I've earned my rights. On his bus ride literally like the first time he re-enters America. The bus makes a stop. He says, "Hey, I need to get off and use the bathroom." The bus driver says, "You have to do what I say.
Yeah.
And you can't go to the bathroom.
You're not in charge here.
Yeah. And he basically says, like, come on, man. Like, they get in kind of an argument. The bus driver gets the police involved. The police beat him so badly. And that's something that, I don't know if Richard Overton dealt with, but there's this kind of understanding in the black community that if you fought overseas or you serve in a war for the country, you're going to have at least some more rights. And when they got back, they realized that wasn't necessarily true. So the fact that his house is still here and the fact that it's going to become a museum and you can come check out his cool truck out here is, I think it's just really cool that we're able to preserve that much history. And it just goes to show you that there's all of it's all around us and it's right here.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, one day your route will have like another museum on it, another preserved house.
Right.
Later, like 100 years later, I don't know when this one was built, but the first one was called the
Haskell House.
The Haskell House, yeah.
Yeah, that was built in the 1880s.
Yeah. So we'll have another one on the tour that's a different generation.
It's a different generation, and he built the house.
Yeah, so cool.
So we're gonna make it to the last stop, which is right down the street. It's called the Victory Grill, which is a bar and a music venue that I'm sure Mr. Overton probably partied at many times. So
he only had to walk home from there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's only like a 15-minute walk. So
perfect. Cool. So the Victory Grill, right next to the Quickie Pickie, actually where we started.
Yeah, convenient. I can draw a circle on
you're
a map.
A professional investor.
Yeah, I can draw a circle on the map. All right, it's not that. But yeah, we're standing here on East 11th Street, which this was actually once like the hub of like the black community in terms of services. There were several grocery stores. People would get their laundry done, everything that you'd find over here. This is basically the segregated part of the city center, where a lot of African Americans, once they were all living over here,
it became the hub.
It was the hub, right? There were banks, restaurants. This was the music venue, the Victory Grill, and undoubtedly, I'm sure Richard Overton drank a lot of whiskey here because this is one of the main bars and music venues over here. So the story goes that Johnny Holmes, a booking agent and band manager, opened the Victory Grill on August 15th, 1945, as a restaurant and a bar for black soldiers returning from the war, much like Richard Overton. In the segregated South of the 1940s, these servicemen could not walk into just any place to have a beer. They had to go one specifically for African Americans. The first incarnation of the Victory was a small lean-to building, but Holmes soon moved to a larger building next door, which is what we see right now.
So this started as a lean-to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Holmes was also familiar with both a burgeoning Texas blues and jazz scene, and soon the club became known for its music as well as its food and drink. The club began attracting music lovers, no matter what their race. During its heyday in the 1950s, most of the popular national blues, rhythm, R&B, and jazz acts that played Austin performed at the Victory Grill. Ike and Tina Turner, James Brown, Etta James, Billie Holiday, Chuck Berry, and Janis Joplin were all some of the artists who graced the stage here. A resident of the area later quoted saying, "The street was so crowded you could barely walk. It was like New Orleans."
Oh.
So this used to be like the spot, for black life. Imagine if James Brown was playing in here.
Oh, I can't imagine.
It was.
I'm just seeing if he was on the roof. Like, how did they hear him? This is like a small building.
Yeah. So if you look, kind of, it's set up to where there's like a bar right here in the building, and if you go down this hallway, there's actually a pretty large music venue in the back.
Right.
It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but once you go back down there, it's like kind of this giant room.
Okay.
And so that's where they'd have like Janis Joplin and James Brown perform in there.
Wow. Cool.
Which by standards today, like there's probably room for like 300 or 400 people in there, so it's still not that big compared to like our music venues.
They probably didn't have fire codes back then, though. They just packed them in.
No, they just packed them in.
Yeah.
Right? The Victor Grill is one of the last remaining original Chitlin Circuit juke joints. Do you know about the Chitlin Circuit?
I was about to ask, no.
Yeah, so the Chitlin Circuit was essentially like the circuit of clubs in each city where black musicians could play. So when James Brown went on tour, it usually wasn't like, oh, you can play here but not here. They just knew like there was a circuit of like 15, 20 different music venues all throughout the Deep South. We were like, all right, this is
safe.
This is a safe place for, African-American performers to play, and the African-American crowds can go there because they couldn't play in the music venues on the other side.
Yeah, you got to think it's before Yelp and Google reviews, and you could be like, "Oh no, you don't want to go to this one." I mean,
No, it's like you got to go right there. Have you seen that movie, The Green Book?
No.
The Green Book is a pretty similar. It's basically about an African American pianist. He gets this green book and a bodyguard to drive him around. Bodyguard's this burly Italian guy, and he's like, "What's up with this book?" Right? So they immediately get into the Deep South, and the jazz pianist is not having a good time because everyone's not treating him well. He's from New York City.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is representative of one of the last places like that was a safe place for people of color to play, like back in the 1950s.
Right.
The Victory Grill is one of the last remaining original Chitlin Circle juke joints. It is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, archived by the Texas Historical Commission, and dubbed a Texas treasure by the statewide organization Preservation Texas. It stands as an artifact to the development of a distinct American music tradition. The restoration of the Victory Grill bridged the era of the Chitlin circuit to today's urban contemporary sounds. The cafe serves Southern cuisine, provides blues, jazz, and urban contemporary entertainment, and provides educational opportunities that link past African American musical forms and culture with the present. I would also like to note that if you look across the street, what do you see in this building?
Fashion spot,
fashion,
design, center?
Lots of interesting angles, and you'd call that a
modern,
a very modern, very contemporary building. And in the street right in front of us, we have the new Black Artists Matter mural that was painted a little over a month ago. So, it's great that this music venue is still here amidst the fact that, this neighborhood is changing quite rapidly and being gentrified, which, like I said, I wouldn't say that we can necessarily stop gentrification. I think that's symptomatic of, or that's the cause of some of these systemic problems we're having.
Right.
But if we start noticing that, and we start, when we're on our bikes or just whenever, we start saying like, hey, like, there's this squatty, small, old building over here with a historical plaque in kind of an area where there's a bunch of new modern houses. Like, maybe we can start thinking about what that really means and what the deeper context is. And we start thinking about what gentrification means, because like I said, I don't expect it to necessarily stop.
But at least educate people.
We should start.
And then give at least some appreciation, acknowledgement.
Exactly. Like, we should start just appreciating and acknowledging a little bit instead of turning a blind eye.
Right. What is your goal with this route, and maybe creating others like it?
Yeah, we're in the biggest bike boom we've ever seen in the current moment, and we're also in one of the biggest civil rights moments ever in history. So my hope is really just to help share Black stories and create an outlet for people to learn Black history in a way that might be a little bit more fun than sitting in a lecture hall or just reading on your phone. We're trying to take the history directly to people and also get people on their bikes so they're able to be active, have fun. And like I said, I think a lot of people, your followers, are maybe a little more used to biking long distances. And they're like super familiar with biking, far distances, which is awesome. Trying to set this up so people that literally bought a bike yesterday, or people that are borrowing a bike like Steve is today, it's easy for them to do, and they're able to walk away feeling like they've learned something, Right.
Yeah, making the whole sport of cycling accessible is a big part of what I'd like to accomplish with the podcast. So I appreciate you coming on and adding your voice. I want to get your perspective. Have you seen it improve for people of color over the years? Are you happy with what you're seeing? Or, obviously a lot more people are aware. Like you said, it's one of the biggest social movements that we've seen. So that's good, right? And now I feel like it's okay, what do we do with that? How do we point it,
Right. Well, I feel like we're really seeing in individual industries, such as the cycling industry, but there are a lot of other industries. You could say skiing, lots of super active outdoor industries. We're starting to notice that once we look at this lens of all right, who's making the decisions, who runs these companies, for bike brands, gear, everything else, the representation of people of color is not what we're seeing with other brands like Target or Walmart. They've acknowledged that a long time ago. We need to sort of be making sure we're selling and acknowledging people of all colors and backgrounds. And we see some of these other brands, I'm not going to say they're implicitly biased, but you're wearing a pair of Smith sunglasses.
Okay.
I have a bunch of Smith gear. I looked at some of their Instagram and social media handles, and I was like, there's not even any Mexican people or Black people riding bikes, skiing, using any
God
of their
damn it,
gear.
they got me.
And well, they got me too because I own a bunch of their stuff. But I was like, I mean, it wouldn't. I don't think it. Interesting place for an interview.
Yeah, this is fun.
It doesn't. It really does nothing. It doesn't hurt them to go in that direction. But it's interesting to notice that every time that they've set up a photo shoot or action photo shoot or people out in the wild, there just haven't either been the talent to hire or no one's thought like, hey, like I have a buddy that rides who happens to be a black guy, Latino guy, or even a women.
They're not trying.
They're not trying at all. And
Yeah,
I'm not trying to use this to call them out, but
Oh, no,
they're not the only brand.
I just happen to be wearing Smith sunglasses.
Well, like I said, I own a Smith helmet and a bunch of other Smith stuff. So I was like, wait, that's not cool. And I mean, the only thing I think most people are asking is to try.
Yeah.
Not asking for radical change. Like I'm not.
I want more than that. I mean, I want to inspire. I want to create a bridge between going outside, riding your bike, and accessibility and funds and all that for people to do it. I mean, you're maybe not familiar with like bikepacking routes, but I donate some of my proceeds to them, and they've already raised like $50,000 for a BIPOC adventure grant program to buy bikes, to pay for trips, to, and you apply for it and all this stuff. But I mean, I've seen a lot of other companies do similar things and purposely hire people of color talent, actors, directors, photographers, whatever it is. So you are seeing some improvement. So are you?
Yeah.
I mean,
and like I said, even the owners of Chumba reached out and they're like, "What can we do to help?"
Yeah.
And I spoke with them for a while just to say, like, I mean, here's some ideas. Like, obviously, I'm just one guy with a bike,
Right.
so I don't have a solution. But we can, at least people they're ready to start asking those questions and they're ready to start having that conversation. But
I think it needs a couple of things. I mean, it needs people like you who are willing to stand up and share your experiences. I mean, obviously, you put together this route, which is incredible, and it's going to service people for years and years to come. Hopefully, that'll come and ride this route. But on top of that, you're a man of color who's coming and like doing something and being a voice and being willing to put yourself out there. And that's not always the easiest thing to do.
Sure.
And then it takes, people like me who are just like, hey, I mean, I didn't come here today. I just came here to learn, right?
Sure,
Like,
yeah.
there's so much I didn't learn. I went to American schools. I know that a lot of the information I got, both about Christopher Columbus and about the lack of information about black people and how we take and we cram in a month and we think that's enough and we check it off and like that's supposed to be good enough.
Right.
I mean, I'm the product of that. So there's so much stuff that I don't know. And I'm like so many other people. I mean, even, I don't know, but maybe even black people who've like gone through the system, like, shit, I didn't even know all this stuff,
I would 100% agree with you because of the way our textbooks are written. And in Texas, well, you're from Texas, so
Yeah, I'm from Texas.
there's a specific like understanding that the history textbooks in Texas they've changed a lot, and history really is written by the victors, so they leave out a lot of important details, like in terms of like Native American, indigenous people, and black people. And my whole thing with doing these rides is I think understanding local history gives us a really good context to understand what's been happening forever. Because that local history isn't taught in schools, but the local history is right here. They created this bar because, the servicemen that came back from World War II wanted to go get drunk like they did in Europe.
They deserved a beer.
They wanted to go drink beers, and they couldn't go right down the street a few blocks to where the other bars were, so they had to open their own bar because. And, like when you think about it that way, you're like, oh, that Jim Crow, I've heard about, and you can kind of connect it together. But I feel like starting to understand and peel back that local history.
Just
really,
history
really
in
does.
general is important. And as I've gotten older, I was the worst student. I didn't even give a crap about any kind of history, but as I've gotten older, I've made it a point to educate myself about the people and the places that came before. I mean, even the wildlife. I mean, how do we impact the wildlife? I mean, I looked at, we displace all kinds of things as humans. We just take over and destroy and conquer and all this stuff. And just need to be more aware and purposeful about what we're doing and like to people. And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like we can't just like go through life with blinders on and think that we can just do whatever the fuck we want to do and there's no consequences.
Absolutely.
So I don't know what else. Do you got anything else that you wanted to share or?
I guess the only thing I would highlight which is something I read just the other day, but I think today's the first day of the Tour de France.
Oh, is it? Okay. I didn't even know.
So they pushed it because it was supposed to be in July, and they might be doing it all virtually. I'm not even sure. So basically, I did want to point out the fact that in us talking about these brands doing better and everyone doing better, like my foray into cycling was because my local bike shop was like, hey, you know what? You're great at BMX. Let's get you on a mountain bike. They kind of let me borrow kind of an old loaner mountain bike to go mountain bike racing. So racing in some of these UCI races is how I really got into cycling as a black kid. And when I was there, I didn't realize I was the only black kid. And I heard the statistic yesterday. It said like, hey, Tour de France is starting tomorrow. There are, how many riders think are in the Tour de France?
200?
172.
Okay.
It's really close. There's 22 teams, 172 riders. How many riders that are black?
3.
1.
Okay.
And he's a British guy. And to me, it's just, that really speaks a lot because I'm like, well, what's up with that? You know,
What is
like,
up with that?
why don't we talk about that more? And why don't we acknowledge that? And why don't we say like, hey, like, what can we do to get more people on bikes or more kids on bikes? And not just on bikes, but thinking about racing competitively or going bike packing or doing things that are going to, you know, work to change like what our sport looks like in a way that, you know, I'm not someone that races or anything, but like, why don't we have like that same amount of representation in?
It's everywhere. It's in the actual sport. I mean, cycling, I mean, that's the sport we're in, is completely white. It's embarrassingly white. That's what I mean, it's embarrassing.
Sure.
And everybody knows it. And so I think, you know, representation is a big problem. We need, again, people to be willing to give a space for people of color, and then also people of color to like be examples. And then other people, they're like, oh, wait, there's that guy that can do that. I mean, think about Major Taylor, you know, the blacks.
Right, yeah.
I mean, how many people did he inspire? It's unquantifiable, but like, what else can we do? I'm a person of action, and I have this platform. I'm like, okay, what can I do? I mean, like, let's just get some representation out there. Let's tell some stories about people like you. And I'm curious. I wanted to ask you a question. So you grew up riding, racing, and you didn't even realize you were the only black guy there.
I'm sure it came up, but I think I just shrugged it off. And it's just like, it's not in the, because I was like 14, 15 when I was racing. Okay. So my understanding of like my race and what that meant wasn't as developed as it is now, because I'm 31. Yeah. So back then I was like, no big deal. Like in my mind, I was like, it's not really a big deal. Like whatever, you know, you don't really think about it in the same way when you're a teenager than you do when you're a grown man, right? And then you're like, okay, because on a lot of the rides I go on, so I am a part of the Major Taylor Club of Central Texas, so I ride with them a lot.
Oh, good.
And it's cool because there actually are a lot of black people on bikes, but when I go on almost any other club ride in town, and I've got a lot of friends in different clubs, I'm literally one of at most 2, you know, people of color riding. I just think it's something that we really need to talk about and really work on doing better. Like I said, I don't have the answer, but if I can bring some more attention to that and just you know, my whole thing is like, I don't want to, you know, I talk about how sad all this history is, but when I'm living my life, I'm out popping wheelies and having fun and riding centuries and, you know, and like going out and having big adventures. And, you know, I also want to make sure that we're not defining, talking about like black people on bikes just by constantly being like, there's not enough black, there's just not enough, because like, I do that enough, and I'm like, all right, fuck it, let's go ride wheelies. You know, like let's go bomb down some enduro lines.
Well, the point is, you want your friends here. It's just making the sport more inclusive, so anybody can come giving examples, making it easy, making it fun. Yeah, it doesn't have to be serious. I mean, the point about riding bikes is absolutely to have a good time, but you know, we can't. There's an underlying thing that we all know is like, there's not a lot of equality here, at least a representation of equality. Maybe people are feeling like I'm very equal, and maybe people are feeling I'm very open, but you know, what are we doing? What kind of conversations are we having, and who are we inviting on our rides, and how can we help? So, I mean, nobody can solve the whole thing, right? But you know, just as a person, a white guy, you know, observing, I'm like, okay, it feels like there's a lot more momentum. I'm seeing things that I hope have long-lasting and positive impacts. And in 20 years from now, cycling won't look like this, you know? But if we sit around, we just sit on our thumbs and drink a beer instead of having a conversation like this, you know, not to say we're going to change the whole thing, but again, I think it's to everybody to do a little bit instead of just sitting around and
So I wanted to ask you this question.
Sure.
And maybe we can get the gears turning, because I've had a couple of conversations about this idea with a couple friends that have done some bike packing tours and long distance tours. So I wanted to ask you about it and see if you think anybody would be interested. I was thinking about doing a ride across Texas from Jasper, Texas to El Paso.
Ooh.
Symbolically, as it's right around 150 miles, so 146 miles. And, symbolically, it's like a ride for justice to kind of, talk about where we've come from, in Texas, but also where we're going. So from Jasper, Texas, where the most recent, very unfortunate, public killings of a black man in the 1990s. You know about that one?
I'm familiar with the sign that used to be there, but not about that killing, no.
Essentially, in the 90s, a black man was dragged to death behind a truck. And so the idea basically is to ride from Jasper, Texas, all the way to El Paso, 846 miles, basically to bring attention to the fact that there's still injustice happening in Texas, and that we have a coalition of cyclists and a coalition of people that want to talk about that and to work on riding kind of to the next destination, which is a big city that is essentially the future of America, which is
like El Paso.
El Paso's a border town, is actually one of the safest cities in America. So essentially, I was like, we can make it a a bike-packing trip. It's only 850 miles.
Dude, let's do it. When are we doing it?
February 2021.
How many days do you think you'll do it in? A week?
14.
14. Oh, you're gonna really extend it out.
Yeah.
Wow. Of course, that sounds awesome, and you should definitely do it. And to whatever extent I can, I'll definitely support it.
Right. Yeah.
Dude,
yeah.
I mean,
maybe just put the word out there a little bit.
Yeah.
We're still working on
I
logistics.
can't even take off 2 weeks of work, man. That's crazy.
Well, I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Maybe what you do is I guess you do it in segments, right?
Yeah.
And some people could ride the whole thing, but nobody has to ride from start to finish. You just hop on
I
where
think
you
we'd have
could.
kind of a bailout where people that once we hit kind of the either Killeen, Temple, or once we cross I-35, it's there's the Austin, which
there's
that ride's maybe 3 or 4 days consecutively, and then the rest of us ride out to El Paso.
Have you done any bike packing?
I haven't. I've always wanted to.
Yeah, that's a perfect time to cut your teeth on 850 miles.
I mean, right?
By the end, you'll be really good.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not that complicated. It's not that complicated. You put your shit on your bike, you ride it for a long ways, you sleep, and you do it again the next day. And
I can do that.
Yeah, you can do it. Dude, I rode with you today. If you can ride a wheelie all the way down the middle of UT campus, you can ride across Texas.
Hell yeah, let's do it.
Well, thanks, dude. Thanks for the tour. Thanks for putting it together. The world needs people to do things, Yeah, the world is started for leaders. That's what I think,
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, and thanks for talking to me and asking so many amazing questions. It's always, I love riding bikes and talking to people about this stuff, so the more people, the better. And we're going to do more of these rides soon and in the future, kind of once the whole pandemic thing lightens up a little bit more. And we're also going to start kind of cataloging all the history and all the routes on blackhistorybikeRide.com. We're working on that website right now, so it's not up right now. But in the meantime, on Instagram, people can follow me, Talib, or Black History Bike Ride.
Talib.
Yeah, Talib. It's my first name twice, like Talib Kweli, the rapper.
And we'll definitely put it on bikesfordeath.com and all that. So definitely got my support. So anything we can do, let's do it.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Dude, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
All right, people. That's all I got for y'all today. I hope you are having a wonderful day. I am. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Even if the world is crazy right now, and I know it is, I hope that you are finding your own internal peace and happiness, and hopefully that'll keep you anchored in these uncertain times. Again, I want to just throw a shout out to Talib. I thought that was a really fun style of interview. I don't know. If you liked it, maybe you can shoot me a DM or something, say, yeah, that was great, or no, I hate that, never do that again. I'm probably going to do whatever I want to do anyway, but it's always nice to hear from people. It really is. I mean that. All right, well, don't forget to enter the Rockgeist raffle for a custom frame bag. Head over to rockgeist.com. Tickets are only $5 each. If you don't win this month, you can try again next month. Boom, easy. Also, don't forget to head over to gooder.com/bikesfordeath and check out my landing page and fiddle around. Maybe buy yourself a few pair. Wouldn't hurt my feelings any. Oh, man. Life is good. All right, friends. Like I said at the beginning, I'm sitting in my new soon-to-be studio. I have big windows. The big barn door is open. I'm staring at a beautiful day. And I think I'm going to just go ride my damn bike.
You load up your bike, you ride away from home. You could be with your friends or you could be alone. You ride for a day or maybe more. You just love being in the great outdoors. Everything you need is strapped to your bars, including that new pillow you got from Santa Claus. And And then you think, oh shit, to yourself. You left that super lightweight tent on the living room shelf. Bikes